Hello and welcome to Philosophy Vibe, the channel where we discuss and debate different philosophical ideas. Today we're going to be focusing on aesthetics. Now, aesthetics is the philosophy of art and beauty. A central topic of aesthetics is questioning whether art can have a universal definition. So, we shall ask the question, what is art and can it be defined?
Well, art can broadly be defined as the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination.
Yes, but this definition does not go far enough into giving a satisfactory answer, as the definition is too broad. One could say the telephone is an example of human creative skill, but would you consider a telephone a piece of art? I'm not so sure. You could even say the same thing about a tractor, or pretty much anything. This is way too broad.
Philosophers have struggled with reaching a universal definition of art, which may lead some to argue that art as a concept is something that cannot be defined.
But how can one honestly understand and appreciate something that has no definition? If we cannot define art, then how can we be sure that something we appreciate as art is actually art? George Dickey, building on the work of Arthur Danto, brought forward the institutional theory as an aim to define art. The institutional theory defines art in two ways. 1. Something is a piece of art if it is an artifact. And 2. On which some person or persons acting on behalf of a certain social institution, the art world, has conferred the status of candidate for appreciation.
Okay.
So point 1. An artifact. Dickey explains that something is only classified as a piece of art once it is in an exhibition for others to view. Once it is on display, it is an artifact.
I see.
And the second point, for the art world to consider it a candidate for appreciation. Here Dickey means once other people with an interest in art start seeing the piece and appreciating it, then the piece becomes art. So it's almost like awareness and appreciation from peers in that field.
Well, I do not think that this is a fair definition of art.
Why not?
Well, let's look at the first point. The idea that art can only be defined if it's an artifact or in an art institute seems to be extremely flawed. Paintings that are not in an art institute can still be appreciated as art and have the same aesthetically pleasing qualities as ones that are in a gallery. It would seem illogical to have the location of art as the defining factor. Oswald Hanfling raised this point. Suppose someone paints a picture or composes a piece of music or writes a poem, and these are never exhibited or published. Would it mean that they are not works of art? Just because these pieces are not in an exhibition, it shouldn't be the deciding grounds as to whether they are classified as art. Surely, art should be about the item itself and not the location of where it's kept or displayed.
Good point.
As for the second part, the art world, surely it seems unreasonable to suggest that just because a piece of art is not appreciated publicly, it means that it does not qualify as art. What if I draw a lovely picture just for myself, a private picture, only I can see this? Would this not be art?
Well, you could say that you as the artist would be considered part of the art world, and as you are viewing the picture, then this would become art.
Okay, but now you're raising even more problems. Who is classified as part of the art world? In what sense does such a person act on behalf of the art world, and how do we get that status?
Interesting.
But ultimately, the biggest flaw within the institutional theory is that its definition of art relies on the appreciation of the art from the art world, but without a specific definition of art. How can the art world appreciate art if there is no clear and distinct definition of it? As you said, you would need to know what art is in order to appreciate it.
Good point. Okay, I'd like to move on and discuss beauty for a second. Many people appreciate art because of its beauty. There are different perceptions of beauty. David Hume endorsed the view that beauty lies within the eyes of the beholder. Some may therefore say that beauty has a specific connection to art, and so what we find beautiful is what defines art.
But this is not a sufficient definition of art.
Why?
Well, if it was just down to what was beautiful, we could say that natural objects may also be classified as art. Take a sunset on the beach as an example. This may be admired and viewed as beautiful, yet it has no connection to the concept of art.
Yes, but a sunset over the beach is not man-made, so we could therefore say that for art to be beauty, it would need to be beauty created purposely by a human.
Okay, but still, there are a lot of works that are considered art that are not beautiful. Beauty is not what a lot of people find in art. Some may appreciate a work of art because of its detail or depth or meaning, however they may not necessarily appreciate its beauty. In fact, some people may appreciate something as art because it is the exact opposite of beauty. It may be horrifying or miserable.
So then how would you define art?
Well, I would agree with Wittgenstein and favour the idea that art does not have a definition. Wittgenstein believed that this worked perfectly well because we did not need to rely on a definition of art. He claimed that art as a term can, and for the most part does, function perfectly well without a definition, and this does not undermine our ability to know what we are talking about when we use the words in question. We all have a concept of art and are able to understand it without a universal definition, so it is not essential to define exactly what art is. Where one may find pleasure in art, others may not. This is because art can be very subjective to an individual, so we are unable to universally identify it. Wittgenstein believed there wasn't a definitive answer to the question, what is art?
But how can we know what art is if it cannot be defined?
Wittgenstein showed how words can have more than one meaning, yet they can be clearly understood. He used many examples to illustrate this point. We've already discussed beauty, so let's take beauty as an example. We know what beauty is, but the beauty of a face is something different from the beauty of a chair or a flower, but we still understand all of them as beautiful.
I see.
Another famous example was making people think of games. We all understand what games are and can recognize them when we see them. So think of board games, card games, ball games, Olympic games, maybe even one person throwing a ball against the wall. They are all completely different types of games and they share very few similarities, but they are all still games. There is no universal definition and no common characteristic that runs through all of them, but we understand them all to be games. And just like there can be different types of games, there can be different types of art. This may include varieties such as music, drawing, painting, acting, dancing that are always evolving and changing over time. There is no one answer to the question, what is art, and no universal definition.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but without some sort of universal criteria, without some sort of underlying definition, does art not become meaningless? If it doesn't have a definition, then art is just what anyone says it is. So someone can spend months or years painting the most magnificent painting one could ever imagine, and then someone else could spend seconds squiggling some lines, or perhaps gathering some trash into a heap and calling it art. Are we really supposed to believe that these two are both under the category of art?
Well, we can still have good art and bad art. The squiggle or the trash can be considered art if the creator believes it to be so, but it doesn't mean that it has to be considered good art. The painting may very well be considered a masterpiece and a great work of art, whereas the squiggles are not good at all.
But then how, if there is not a definition, can we deduce whether something is good or bad art? What then makes a piece of art good if we cannot define what art is in the first place? If we have no definition, we cannot say whether something meets a criteria in a better or worse way than something else.
Perhaps if a substantial amount of people agree it's good, then it becomes good art.
But see, now you are running into the problems we discussed previously. If a piece of art is not seen by a lot of people, then it can never be a good piece of art. If the Mona Lisa had never been seen, does this mean it was not a good piece of art? Also, how many people need to agree for it to be considered good? What if one person does actually like the squiggles? Does it then become a good work of art?
Yes, I see the problem.
So essentially, if we cannot define art, if there is no universal criteria to meet to be considered art, and art is totally subjective, then I would argue art loses a part of its meaning. Nothing then can be considered good or bad art, just good or bad to each individual. If, however, we agree there is something more to art, that there can be objectively good art, that all sound of mind people can recognize art when it is intended to be art, then it means there is a definition, an underlying criteria. It's just that philosophers and artists have perhaps not been able to describe it yet.
Very interesting.
Indeed. But that's all the time we have for now. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed the vibe. And what does everybody else think? How would you answer the question, what is art? Can art be defined? Maybe you have a definition of art. If so, leave your comments below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye bye.